So last week I told you we're going to be going through the Lord's Prayer, sort of a phrase at a time. And last week we looked at that one word address, at least in Luke's gospel, that one word address of Father. And today we're going to look at the first of what are known as their petitions. They're things that we're asking of our Father. And depending on the version of the prayer, there's either two or there's three petitions. And the fancy seminary word for these petitions is that they're eschatological petitions. They have to do with end times. They have to do with prayers about that ultimate and complete reign of God that we hope will one day be realized. And then there are three petitions that follow about us and the help that we need in our daily walks. And then we'll conclude. In Matthew's version, there's a final closing ascription, if you will, glorifying God. But so today, this first petition, and it's present in both versions, is hallowed be thy name. May your name be holy. Now, we want to remember that the disciples asked Jesus to teach them how to pray, not just merely teach them a prayer. And so we can see here that Jesus believes that the very first thing that we should be mindful of in prayer, very first thought we have, the very first concern on our minds and the words on our tongue should be about God, not ourselves. Anybody here guilty of rushing right past that and just saying, Father, I need... Well, remember, be concerned about, give acknowledgement to God beyond that first word of Father, if you will. Father, may your name be holy. May it be special. Even though, as we talked about last week, even though Jesus would have us know and relate to God as our intimate, our loving, and our forgiving Father, our Father is always first and foremost to be respected and honored. Now, did Jesus just make that up? No. These are common beginning petitions from Jewish prayers of the day. And as radical a reformer as Jesus was, he was very much a reformer within a tradition, and he was maintaining that tradition. So where might this Jewish tradition of beginning a prayer with a concern that God might be respected and honored, where does that come from? Well, we can certainly look to that foundational document that we know as the Ten Commandments, right? Chiseled in stone. I'll remind us, I had to remind myself, how those Ten Commandments begin. The first three are, I am the Lord thy God. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make graven images. Thou shalt not take the name of thy Lord thy God in vain. So right from the start, know who I am and respect and honor my name. I like to think that those first commandments, and the reason that they're first is because in order for us to be the people that we're to be, the people that God would have us be, we must first know and respect who God is, and then who we are in relation to God. Another way to put it is, we have to know who God is and acknowledge that we are not God. Right? So the first petition of the Lord's Prayer reminds us to keep God first and foremost in our hearts and minds, because unless we have God in the right place in our hearts and minds, we will never be in the right place ourselves. In Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, Juliet asks the night sky this question: what's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. But in ancient Jewish culture, and indeed still in many modern Jewish families and communities, one's name is very important. A great deal of thought goes into choosing the name and the bestowing of the name on a new baby. One's name is tied to a person's character, their identity. is tied to that name. To besmirch or disrespect someone's name is to disrespect and besmirch their very being. So certainly in Jesus' day, the answer to what's in a name would be everything. Everything's in a name. So what is God's name that we're asked to respect and keep holy? Isaiah 42:8 gives these words to God. It says, I am Yahweh. That is my name. I will not give my glory to another or my praise to idols. Again, hearkening back to those first commandments. And if we remember the story of Moses and the burning bush, we can find in that story the beginning of how it is that God's name came to be Yahweh in ancient Judaism. It'll remind us all, Moses asks a voice that's in the burning bush, what should I say when they ask what God sent you? What Elohim sent you? What do I say to the folks when they ask that? And the answer is, I am who I am. Tell them I am sent you. Wikipedia, and I always want to put an asterisk by that, although I can't think of any reason not to trust this. Wikipedia says that the traditional English translation that they use within Judaism is not I am who I am, but is instead I will be what I will be. Because there's no present tense of the word to be in the Hebrew language. So, in many Jewish communities, they would say, what does God answer to the question of what shall we call you? I will be what I will be. And I hear in that a little bit of, don't try to nail me down. I will be what I will be. But of course, we humans want to nail things down. And so Moses, of course, wanted to give a name. And so he converted I will be who I will be into he will be who he will be. And if you take phonetic elements of that sentence and shorten it down, it becomes Yahweh. And then it's written in the Hebrew scriptures, there are no vowels. It's just YHWH. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. That's to ensure that even that written symbol of God's name might not be dishonored in some way. We're not even going to put the vowels in there because that piece of paper, that papyrus might be crumpled up. Someone might spill something on it. So we're not even going to write down the full name. That's how much respect they give to God's name. So how did we get from Yahweh to the English word that we know as God, G-O-D? Well, when Christianity was introduced to the British Isles, there was already a word for a supreme being. The English word God comes from a very ancient English form of God, which shares roots with all sorts of other Germanic languages, Gothic, Norse, Saxon, Frisian, Dutch, Got, Gut. So clearly, for us, keeping God's name holy is not about insisting that God's name is God, G-O-D. That was a name that was already used to describe various gods, small g, in the various cultures. It was appropriated to name this Judeo-Christian Yahweh that was introduced there. I have to admit, I get a little frustrated with people who get upset when someone of Arabic descent calls God Allah, as if somehow God is being maligned and not respected in that case. Allah is God in Arabic. It actually has roots in the Hebrew Bible. Remember I said that Moses said, what God shall I say? What Elohim shall I say? Well, Eloah, God of might, that's the root that Allah comes from. So in fact, the word Allah has more biblical roots than our word God does. All right. When we pray, hallowed be thy name, we're praying some version of may thy name be holy, keep your name holy. May everyone acknowledge that you are the one true God. Dear God, act to establish your own sovereignty, if you will. God, work in the world in such a way that people will know who you are and respect who you are. But I have to ask us, and I have to ask myself, is it up to God to keep or make God's name holy? Or is it not in actuality up to us to make sure that we make and keep God's name hallowed or not? I don't think we should really waste much time trying to police the broader society about respecting the name of God. I'm afraid that horse has left the gate. But we should certainly do all that we can do in our own daily lives, in our own homes, certainly in our own church communities, to keep God's name as something sacred. Is it wrong to say, God, or, oh my God, as an exclamation? I've heard that sermon preached, that it is. But, well, I want to ask, when we say that, are we addressing God? Are we acknowledging God's presence and action in our life? Or are we really just saying something that might easily be, oh my stars, oh my stars? See, it's the mindfulness, I believe. The mindfulness or the non-mindfulness that makes all the difference in the way that we use that. Reducing God's name to a one-word expletive comparable to any number of other colorful swear words that we might insert, that's certainly not doing anything to keep God's name holy in our minds or by our example in another person's life. And such expressions are certainly taking the Lord's name in vain, if you will. A particular pet peeve of mine, I see this in certain television shows all the time where things are revealed to people. You know, a house transformation has taken place in every single room that someone walks into. Oh my God! Oh my God! You know, it might be a new dishwasher. Oh my God! You know, the house has been painted yellow. Oh my God! I think, is there really any thought in that, or is that just your go-to thing, right? Now, and I can't be too hard on them because I've got my own things that I don't think through that, you know. But when it just becomes everything from wow to oh how terrible, I don't hear any mindfulness there. You know, hey, what do you think of my new car? Oh my God! How was that new restaurant? Oh my God! But I believe that that expression, or even a one-word exclamation of God, doesn't have to become profane, doesn't have to be diminishing of God's name, if we're mindful of filling in the rest of perhaps the implied sentence that follows it. For example, imagine yourself looking across some vast urban slum and saying, God, how did this happen? What can we do? Right? Fill that in. Or, I believe, even smashing your thumb with a hammer. This is a little closer to home. Smashing your thumb with a hammer and saying, God, I need your help right now because I'm doing all I can to stay in my skin and I need your presence and help as I try to deal with this one. Right? I'm not taking the Lord's name in vain if I'm not just throwing in a swear word. God, I am in such pain. Well, a one-word exclamation of God's name can be prayerful if we intentionally direct the emotion that we're feeling toward God and we seek God's guidance and interaction with us in the midst of that emotional state. Sometimes it's the best prayer we can lift up. God. And just hope that we might feel God's response. Right? Ultimately, it's up to us each, as individuals, certainly as Christian communities, to make God's name holy in our minds and in our hearts. And by our example, doing what we can to make it holy in the broader use out in the communities beyond. My hope would be for us all, and I want you to know your pastor is hearing himself preach to himself here when I say this. Each time that we say, hallowed be thy name, that we would renew a commitment to keep God's name and the many different names that we might use for our Creator holy in our hearts, in our minds. Amen?